the office as secretary of the convention and the Diocese of Connecticut. And that's a big title and a big job because Reverend Kohl is responsible for a number of administrative tasks dealing with the Episcopal Church in Connecticut as a church, but also as a corporate entity in the state. And so I will leave it to her in her presentation to to explain some of those roles as she tells us about the governance of the Episcopal Church in Connecticut. And who better to talk about this topic than the Secretary of the Diocese, Reverend Kohl.
Thank you so much, Gilda. It really is an honor to be with all of you today. I would love to open us in prayer if you all wouldn't mind and would join me. This is a prayer that I get to pray a lot. It is from the Book of Common Prayer. It is for a church convention or meeting. So I would ask you to join me in prayer this morning. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with those who take counsel for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So I will say, if there was a guiding principle for my job, that prayer is it. That's what my job is all about as Secretary of Convention and the Diocese. And as Gilda mentioned, we are a corporate entity as well as being the Episcopal Church in Connecticut. Now, before I dive in, I want to give you two abbreviations you might hear me use. That way, if you hear me use them, you're not going, what did she say? If I say ECCT, and it'll come out fast, ECCT, that is the Episcopal Church in Connecticut. That's us. That's our diocese. And if I say TEC, TEC, that is the Episcopal Church, which I believe Dean Lena, I saw her presentation from last week, helped unravel a bit of that. So TEC and ECCT. And of course, we are, as ECCT, a part of the Episcopal Church of TEC. We are part of Province 1, if you remember from last week's presentation, where we kind of sit in the global sphere of what is the Episcopal Church. We are in Province 1, which is the oldest province. We've been around since pre-colonial, so we've been here a long time. We are a colonial church, which makes us an interesting entity to deal with, particularly when working with governmental entities and things like that, because our existence predates the existence of the United States. So even in matters of figuring out tax exemption and who's a parish and who owns things, all of this for a while was a little complicated. The Episcopal Church actually exists in Connecticut by statute of the state of Connecticut. And I'm not going to go into too much detail with that because it doesn't affect our governance much anymore. But in order to kind of help clarify who are we in relationship to Connecticut and ourselves, the state of Connecticut actually set forth, here's who you are in relationship. So I always find that a really interesting little historical tidbit, is that even with separation of church and state and all those things, we had to get a little clarification from the state of who we are. But in terms of our own internal governance, the place I really want to start talking about with us is our annual convention. And as you heard in my title, Secretary of Convention and the diocese. As you can imagine, Secretary of Convention and our annual convention plays a really big role in my job. Our annual convention is held it's kind of become every October. September, October is generally when it falls. And I'm going to share my screen for just a little bit. Let me get this up and going so I can talk a little bit more about our annual convention. Let's see, this one right there, share screen. Because I want to start off with talking a little bit about what is annual convention. Annual convention is a lot of things. Annual convention is a family reunion. It's a time for us all to gather together and to see each other. I don't know about all of you, but I don't often see my friends and colleagues from across Connecticut. So this is an opportunity for all of us to gather together and just reconnect. It's also an opportunity for us to join together in worship. It's an opportunity for us to be inspired and hear from both our bishops as well as other ministries that are going on across Connecticut and to hear about what's happening. And it's an opportunity for us to do, as in that top center picture, the business of the diocese. This is where we come together and be about what is God calling us to? What's next? Where's God leading? And how are we discerning that together? Because the thing with the Episcopal Church and with the Episcopal Church in Connecticut is we are a representative form of government. I always talk about and have always talked about the similarities of Episcopal Church governance to the United States government. Unfortunately, that analogy isn't working quite as well lately. So in theory, we're going to talk about when all things are functioning as they are intended with our governance, not ours, but with the federal government and the state government and all such things. But when the ideal is happening, checks and balances, bicameral houses, representative governments, the Episcopal Church and the Episcopal Church in Connecticut as well are really designed off of that. So if you got the impression last week, as Dean Lena was sharing, that General Convention felt a lot like maybe the federal government and House of Representatives and the Senate, well, now we're moving down a layer to the state government. Here we are at our state government level. And that's really what annual convention is the gathering of our state government. So who is this? What is this annual convention thing? It is a convention that will be held at least once a year at a time and place established by the Mission Council of the diocese. Now, I will say the Mission Council has tasked me with establishing the place and time, which is super fun because that means I get to search all over Connecticut for places that can hold 500 plus people, which is a lot harder than it seems. Because included in convention, the members of convention are the bishop, as well as a variety of bishop options, some of which we don't have, but the bishop, the suffragan bishop, the chancellor of the diocese, who is Brad Babbitt, the treasurer of the diocese, who is Gordon Ross, the secretary of the diocese, and note this, the secretary of convention, the clerical members, and the lay members. I noted this separation because my job actually has been uniquely combined in our diocese, so it's really fun. Sometimes in our constitution and canons, it will actually say the secretary of diocese will talk to the secretary of convention, and then the secretary of convention will answer the secretary of the diocese. So I get to talk to myself. But this is who our members of our convention are. This is who comes together at that annual meeting to talk, to discuss, to vote. And now I'm hoping you're wondering, well, how do you get to be a lay member? The clerical member is pretty obvious. You're an ordained person. All of our deacons, all of our priests, retired and active bishops, retired and active clergy are all members of convention. And by their vows and ordination are required to take part in the the councils of the church. So they got to show up. But to be a lay member, the lay members to any convention shall be delegates elected by, there you all are, you're first, the cathedral congregation, parish as well as worshiping communities. And IECs, each one shall elect 2 from the adult communicates. By the way, in Connecticut, an adult, and across the Episcopal Church, an adult communicate is 16 years old. So if you have that really great 16-year-old, you can send them to convention. 2 lay delegates to convention. In the case of the vacancy, you can send somebody else. That's great. I'm going to stop my share now for a minute so that I can see all your lovely faces again, and so you're not having to stare at those words the whole time. So that's who convention is. Convention is clergy and laity. You're starting to hear that kind of dual bicameralness. In our convention, if you've ever had the opportunity to attend or watch any of the videos online, it's a little hard to tell that we actually have kind of that 2 system, because we all sit together and most of the time we all vote together. Clergy and laity vote as one by canon in Connecticut, unless a vote is called by orders. So fun language, vote by orders, and then you'll see clergy and laity vote separately. That usually only happens at bishop elections. Brad and I recently had a conversation. He can't remember in his entire chancellorship the last time this happened. So it's not very common. But so what is this thing? What is annual convention? Why are we showing up here? Well, for one thing, we need a budget. If the Episcopal Church in Connecticut is going to function just like any entity, we need a budget. We need to know, how are we spending the funds that God and our parishes and our communities and the church in general are gathering? So the budget is approved at annual convention. It is formed in consultation with the full diocese. Did you catch that? The budget is formed in conversation with the full diocese. Coming up in just a few weeks are going to be the start of our annual budget listening sessions. These are done on Zoom. They're held by Canon Rosanna Rosado and her team to listen to everyone, because all of you have a voice in ECCT. Whether you are a voting member of convention or not, you have a voice. So you are welcomed into these budget conversations early on in the process to share about what you see, what you feel, where you see those needs are in your communities. The budget, in consultation with staff, with ministry network partners, with parishes, is formed. It goes before Mission Council. We'll get to Mission Council in a little bit. And then comes before convention for convention's vote. So pretty important role, approving the budget, fiscal responsibility. The other place that you really see the importance of convention in action is in our resolutions. And as we move into kind of, the summer, you hear my voice more and more, both in e-news and if you're ever on Wednesday morning calls, or really a lot of places, reminding people, hey, resolutions are due soon. Resolutions are due soon. Resolutions are due soon. Resolutions are exactly what they sound. They are statements presented to the church asking us to do something, say something, spend money on something. These are things that we are saying as a whole church and coming together and saying, we believe this, and because of that, we do this. Resolutions have to be presented by 5 members of convention, clergy or laity. That's it. That's the only requirement for a resolution to come before convention, except it has to be submitted 4 weeks before convention. And that date, as I just said, is very well publicized. And there's an online form. Once that's done, as long as you have 5 voting members of convention, clergy or lay, that resolution comes before convention. So sometimes those resolutions have been asking general convention to do something, have been asking the entire Episcopal Church. And in fact, some of the more recent initiatives that have come about at our general convention started right here in Connecticut. Started right here in Connecticut with us going to general convention and saying, hey, can you start looking at the number of clergy of color? Can you start paying more attention to that? Can you start looking at this other thing? Would you please start tracking this? Those things start making a difference. They also make a difference here locally. Our reparations, which came through 2 years ago, the reparations board, which is working and forming and developing to figure out what that reparations piece will look like in Connecticut. Our support of our LGBTQIA siblings has come through convention multiple times to reiterate that. Our support and our efforts to join with our Indigenous siblings. Lots of things come through convention. And you can read all of these online. They're all online, and I'll show you where they are at the end. So resolutions matter. And you can bring your voice to that. And the beautiful thing is, as members of the cathedral, you have kind of a bonus, because between your 2 lay delegates and your multiple clergy, you're pretty close to your 5. You may actually have it. I know with Deacon Bonnie and Dean Lena, you're about there. So if you have a resolution you're looking to put forward, you're pretty close. Let me now move down a layer again to how do you get those lay delegates here? Because as I said, you're representative. The thing I really hope you take away today is how much voice you have in the Episcopal Church in Connecticut. It can feel like, with something as large as the Episcopal Church, with close to 150 parishes and intentional Episcopal communities in our cathedral, like, whew, this is a big thing. They're not going to hear me. You have voice. You have immense voice, and that voice translates to vote. By voting in your representatives to convention, by sitting with them as resolutions come in and as they review them, by talking together, by sitting as the cathedral community and saying, hey, we've seen this resolution, we're curious, let's talk more about how the cathedral thinks about that. Those are opportunities for you to come together and have your voice heard at convention. Okay. So that's just a little bit. Plus, I will say, in addition to the business, which, I try to make fun, convention is fun. Our goal is that it really is an experience of community, of connection, of a time of coming together to be restored and reinvigorated in our role here in Connecticut and what we are doing in Connecticut, because this really is our central moment together as the Episcopal Church. This is our moment where we gather as clergy and laity to inspire and encourage one another. And then we carry that back out to our parishes together. That's why convention is such a big part of my job and why I take it so seriously. And why you will constantly hear me cheering on convention, 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 because it's really fun. So before I move on past convention, I'm wondering if there are any questions about that particular area. I'm happy to pause and answer those before I move us along to our kind of next layer of governance. Feel free to sing out or raise your hand. And if not, I'll keep going. Excellent. All right. Well, if they come up, sing out, raise your hand. So also at convention, we elect, oh, yes, Gilda. Oh, you're muted.
So I just realized that, I mean, the stuff on convention is fascinating, but being mindful of our time, I want to make sure you have time to talk about some of the other diocesan bodies like Standing Committee, Commission on Ministry, Mission Council. So just wanted to give you that little hint.
Thank you so much, actually. And thank you. I it's almost like I paid you, because that's where I'm heading right now, is Standing Committee. So allow me now to share my screen again for just a moment and introduce you all to your Standing Committee. If I can get the screen up. The Standing Committee. This is the members of the Standing Committee. The Standing Committee, we vote on 3 members every year. And as you'll notice, there are 9 members. This committee has 3 main functions. And this committee is not only canonical in ECCT, it's canonical in tech, in the Episcopal Church at large. Every diocese has to have a standing committee. It has oversight, advice, and in the absence of the bishop, ecclesiastical authority. So this is a group that comes together, is elected by convention, comes together, and the bishop uses this, our bishops both, but particularly Bishop Jeff as our bishop diocesan. This is a place that it can be a space of advice. So if there are questions, if there are wonderings, so I will say, Standing Committee walked very closely with Bishop Jeff as we were moving through the reorganization of about a year and a half ago, and talked a lot as we rolled out the staff reorganization. They do things like consent to bishop elections from across the Episcopal Church. So when a bishop is elected in Maine, other dioceses have to approve that election. So that's a role of the Standing Committee. They have a role in what are called alienations and encumbrances, because the property, including the cathedral of the Episcopal Church in Connecticut, is held in trust for our parishes. That means you all, cathedral's a little different, but the parishes hold the responsibility for caring for the property, but the property is owned by the diocese. It's a bit of a complicated relationship. We're not going to go into that today. If you want to know more, call me or email me. I'm happy to sit down and talk to you for hours about it. But when a parish wants to enter into a rental agreement or sell part of their property, they have to get approval from the Standing Committee first to ensure that they're protecting themselves as well as protecting the property. For example, recently we had a parish who came and was trying to sell some property for a very, 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 very small sum of money. And the Standing Committee kind of went, can you do some more due diligence on that? We're not saying no, we're just saying, could you look a little deeper? And the parish said, okay, we'll look deeper, and came back and I think quadrupled the amount of money that they got for this piece of land. So these are things that the Standing Committee does to really be present. And in the absence of any bishop, so note I said any, not just diocesan, absence of any bishop, they are the ecclesiastical authority of the diocese. So when Bishop Ian retired, Bishop Laura was still here. So she remained our ecclesiastical authority. If both of our bishops, heaven forbid, were both gone at once, our Standing Committee would take over in that situation. And they play a role in bishop transitions. So that's our Standing Committee, and this is just a little screen you can read later. I'm going to send all these slides to Dean Lena so she has them. Council of Advice, this all just tells that. So Mission Council. Mission Council is convention between conventions. So Mission Council exercises the full power and authority of the diocese between sessions of the diocesan convention, except when it doesn't. And I'm going to thank Bishop Laura for that language because I loved that language. It does, except when it doesn't. So it doesn't in things like it can't pass new resolutions. It can't change existing resolutions. It can't make major changes to the budget. But what it can do is help the bishops and the staff and parishes interpret resolutions. So if a resolution feels a little unclear, the Mission Council serves as a space of advice to help interpret a resolution. It also serves as a space of fiscal responsibility and fiscal check. So every quarter, we get a financial update as Mission Council on the state of the diocese, how things are going, are things moving through, what are the watch areas, what are the areas where things are going well. And Mission Council, as I said, meets quarterly. I am the secretary of Mission Council, so that's really my diocese role is secretary of Mission Council. Mission Council is one of these other places where your voice really does get heard, because Mission Council is, as again, partially elected by convention. Members of ministry networks go before a convention to be elected, but 2 representatives, 1 clergy and 1 layperson from every region are elected to Mission Council. So you in the North Central region, your region leadership team has established a process by which they elect representatives. So if you are interested in being involved in Mission Council, this is an opportunity. The region leadership teams I know are always looking for more people who are interested in participating in that. And this is another space of voice where you can have that influence. So region leadership teams, Mission Council pipeline. There are some other leadership bodies. I'm not going to go quite as in depth on those just because their levels of governance are a little different, but I'll talk a bit about them. Our Commission on Ministry. This works specifically with our people who are working through the ordination process. So those who have felt a calling and are feeling led to move into ordination, either in the diaconate or the priesthood, work with the Commission on Ministry. Commission on Ministry also works with lay people to help them as they discern their calling in the world. The Board of Trustees of Donations and Bequests for Church Purposes, Inc., quite possibly our longest board title. This board helps manage the endowments which are put into donations and bequests for church purposes, which manages endowments for parishes across ECCT, including the cathedral. The Disciplinary Board of the Episcopal Church in Connecticut does just what it sounds like. It helps handle disciplinary issues for clergy. Know what I said for clergy? This is just clergy. And then our region leadership teams, of course. And as you know, we are divided, or as I hope you know, we are divided into 6 regions: Northwest, Southwest, North Central, South Central, Northeast, and Southeast. And I'm going to stop my share for a moment so I can check on our time. So that's a little bit of kind of the lay of the land. Some other things the convention does elect that I didn't include on our slide are both the board of Camp Washington and the cathedral chapter. And I'm excited. I believe Gilda is going to speak next week about the cathedral's unique governance and structure, because the cathedral exists a little different than a parish. You're not a parish. Although you have some parish-like aspects, your governance is different. And so how that relates to ECCT at large plays out a little differently. The final thing that happens within the governance and structure is, of course, the staff, of which I am a part. I am on staff at ECCT. I am half-time role, my secretary role, is half-time, and I do about quarter time on the communications team as well, helping out with website stuff. So our staff is there to help bring about the mission and vision as laid out by our bishops and convention. That's really the role of staff, is to support the parishes so that we can bring about what convention and our bishops have called us to. There we go. And I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions or wonderings, or even kind of a, hey, I'm not sure where to find this. Where is it? Can you tell me more? Bonnie.
Well, good morning, and thank you for this. I was wondering for the COM and Standing Committee and Mission Council, etc., if someone vacates a seat due to relocation or long-term illness or even death, are those replacements appointed or are they voted on? How does that happen?
So those replacements are nominated by the bishop and then approved by the particular body, and in some cases by a different body. So for commission on ministry, if somebody has to step away or vacate their space, mission council would approve that new person. Standing committee approves their own, commission, or mission council approves their own. They're appointed by the bishop, but they only stay on until the next convention. So if somebody vacates their term at the beginning of a 3-year term, both mission council and standing committee are 3-year terms. If they get elected in October and then move away in December, the person who is appointed does not stay on for the next 3 years. They are only on until the next convention. And then that space is considered vacant. And if that person wants to stay on, they have to stand for election. Mission council is a 1-year term. Yes, Tom.
Hey, Stacey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
One of the things that I think can be added is, where is the ECCT office? I know where it is. You know I know where it is. It's a
What a
beautiful
fantastic question. Oh, thank you, Tom. So ECCT offices are located in Meriden, Connecticut. They are often called the Commons, which I should have added to my list of abbreviations that are, code words. So it's called the Commons. It is at 290 Pratt Street in Meriden. We've been there for quite a few years now, and we'll be there for quite a few more at this point. And it's a really wonderful space that is open to you. It is your commons. So you're welcome to come by anytime and see us, say hi to staff, hang out. We got a nice coffee space. We'll sit and chat with you. And if you come by at lunch, let me tell you, Wednesdays in particular are quite the party. And we have a worship service at noon every Wednesday that is a full Eucharist that is held in the chapel, which is located in the Commons. Lately, we've had music with it too, because one of our staff members, Bishop Laura's new assistant, Jeanette, has been providing music. So it's really a wonderful experience. So you're welcome to come, have worship with us, bring your lunch, sit down and laugh with the staff during lunch.
May I also add that, having been on the disciplinary committee since probably forever, never mind. But anyway, but it's really good if you're asked to serve, because you learn so much, right, Gilda? You learn so much about how everything really works. And you gave a really wonderful overview, as quickly, but it really makes sense. And then, having gone to convention a number of times, that is fun. It's challenging, but it's fun.
Yes. Yes. It is, we work hard, but we have fun. That's what I like to say. Jilza.
Yes. picking up on Tom's cue, I mean, where I've been involved is with one of the ministry networks. Maybe you could talk a bit about the ministry networks and how they fit in with this.
Absolutely. So ministry networks are voluntarily created. So a ministry network is not created by the diocese or by proclamation of convention. All you need to be a ministry network is to have 3 or more people from different parishes or 2 or more parishes who are interested in the same thing. So it's a pretty simple thing to become a ministry network. So we have ones about creation care, racial healing, justice and reconciliation, gardening, prison ministry, lots of ministry networks where people in parishes across ECCT have come together to say, hey, we're already doing this work locally in our parish. Let's see if we can't do it all together across Connecticut and connect those spaces together. So ministry networks were formed with that idea in mind. Now, I will say the pandemic played a little havoc with some of our ministry networks. Some of them are back up and running strong. Some of them are still working to get things back going again. Because as you can imagine, those coordinations across the state got a little trickier. But the ones that are really up and going, food ministries, creation care, these are areas where people from across the state can come together and talk about what's working and what they're doing. And from those ministry networks come mission council members. So ministry network members can put themselves forward or be requested by the secretary of the convention of the diocese to stand for election to mission council. So really, ministry networks are a great way to connect with people who have the same interests, passion, calling that you do. And the great thing is, if there's not one already doing it, find a couple friends and start one. Look and see who else around is also doing this work. And say, hey, mate, do we want to just do a Zoom call and see what comes of this? And something a lot of people don't know is there are funds available for our ministry networks. There are ministry networks grants available to help ministry networks not only form, but also continue the work that they're doing. So if you're, needing a little help getting off the ground, or if your ministry network is already going and you need a little bit, there's funds available. The diocese has funds available. It's called a ministry network grant. Search for it on ECCT's page. It'll come up. It's there for you. Hi, Carlene.
Hi, good morning. You mentioned that you only need 5 persons to bring forth a resolution on the convention. How many votes are needed for that resolution to pass?
Simple majority.
Okay.
A simple majority.
Sometimes it's by raising the hand and sometimes it's calling each name.
Yes. So the way we vote generally at convention is, if you've been there, is I now use orange cards. We used to use red and green, which is incredibly confusing, particularly for our colorblind siblings. My son is colorblind, and so I have a particular heart for those who are colorblind. So I moved us to orange. Everybody gets an orange card in celebration of October and fall. And so generally we do a card raise. And I would say 98% of the time, it is fairly clear from the dais where myself and the bishops and the chancellor and the treasurer are sitting, okay, that passed, or nope, that didn't. If it didn't, or if there's question, we call for what's called a counted vote. Now we ask everybody again, okay, if you're in favor, raise your card and hold it up. And I have assistant secretaries of convention who are members of the ordination process. These are people who are exploring ordination, who are assigned sections of the convention hall and they go around and they count. And then they bring those counts to me, and then we do it again with the no's and we count. That way we can get an accurate number. So we will have counted votes, but we haven't had one in a few years because most of the votes have been pretty clear. And I will say my favorite vote is what we call by acclamation. So these are when a parish merges. We just clap. We clap and cheer because it's a good thing. Great question, Carly.
So many years ago, I was, no ideas, Dean Lena. I was a member of BDEC, and I was just wondering, I don't see the name, what's the name of that group now?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Many years ago, I was a member of BDEC, the Bishop's Diocesan Executive Council.
Yes. So Executive Council became Mission Council.
Okay.
So Mission Council is more or less the new Executive Council. So if you're interested, I'm always looking for people. But really, one of my goals is to really be sure we're having diverse voices from across the state and across our communities represented, so that really, if this is an area that you find interesting and you find even a hint of interest, even just a twinkling in your eye of interest, I would love to talk to you more or invite you to contact me, because really being part of the governance of an organization like the Episcopal Church in Connecticut really is a gift, and it is a blessing to be able to walk together and offer to God our unique skills and gifts in these areas, and also to see the fruits of that, to see the ways in which God really is moving and working through things like governance. And really, who thought God could move through administration and governance? But they do all the time. And it's one of my favorite things to see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for a couple more questions if anyone has another question. Otherwise, as a governance nerd, I will ask, from your platform as Secretary of Convention in the diocese, what do you see as the governance challenges, if any, ahead for ECCT?
Mm-hmm.
Where are the growing edges? That's probably a better way to put it.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. Our growing edges really are connection. And I think this is something we see, we see this still across all areas of life. The pandemic didn't help us in connection, and we're still recovering from that. But even before the pandemic, these ideas of how are we connected to one another are really challenging. And so having our leadership bodies, having our leadership gathering, and this is one of the things I didn't mention, was we have what's called a leadership gathering, which is standing committee, mission council, commission on ministry, and the board of donations and bequests come together. Those four groups come together quarterly for leadership gathering. And it's really just a time for those leadership bodies to be in the same room together, to connect, to talk to one another, to get better understanding about everybody's roles. Because I think one of the hardest things is when we don't understand what the other team is doing, when you don't understand what the other group's role is, it can be really hard to just own your piece of the puzzle. So this is one of those things of a growing edge, is clarifying and expanding our knowledge of what each other's roles are and responsibilities, and also growing that trust across leadership bodies. And then making each other's, and I will use this word, evangelists for what's happening at leadership levels. Because we never want what's happening in mission council or standing committee or all those things to be a secret. Now, there are things that are confidential, of course, but there aren't secrets. There are things that, again, may be held in confidence, but we want those things to be shared back to the parishes. And so I think continuing to grow those strengths, to grow those skills of not only connection to each other, but also that pipeline of information from our various leadership bodies out to our regions, out to our parishes, is really our growth edge right now. And I'm really excited. We've got some good things working with Canon Runjit, who's our canon to the ordinary, about some really exciting things for our leadership gathering coming up in the next year or so. We met last week, and I'm so excited.
One other question. Nobody else has, does anybody else have a question? One of the things that I've become aware of over the last few years is the number of churches in ECCT that have either no clergy or very part-time clergy. And some of those people with the churches with no clergy are in transition and preparing to call a new priest. Others simply cannot afford a full-time, even a very part-time priest. And there are a number of others that have under half-time. And so how do those communities fit in the governance structure of ECCT?
Absolutely. They have full voice and vote at annual convention. That's the first thing to remember. Simply because your parish does not have settled clergy, what are called settled clergy, does not change your status at annual convention. So those parishes that have been without clergy for a while are still voting members of convention, still sending 2 lay delegates to convention every year. And I will tell you, I hunt down parishes. If I haven't seen their lay delegates come through on my little, tracking sheet, I'll check in with them and say, hey, do you have them? Because we want your voice there. Your voice is really important. So they still have voice and vote at convention, regardless of their clergy status. And I think that's critically important because those are voices and votes that we need represented. We don't just want parishes that have clergy in the room. We want to hear from those who are struggling with that very challenging issue as well.
Well, we're about at 10 minutes before the hour, and I know there is another service coming up. Some of us participated in the 8 o'clock version of morning prayer. And I want to thank the Reverend Stacey Kohl for taking time on this snowy, rainy, icy, depending on where you are in the state, morning to be with us, and for her enlightening presentation on the governance of ECCT.
Thank you all so much for having me. It's really a joy, and hopefully next time I'll get to be with you in person. Thank you.
We'll count on that.
Yes,
we'll
I
make
would
a
love
note of
to.
that.
Thank you all. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.